They say a king doesn't kneel. That is the first rule of survival in our world. You stand tall. You bare your teeth. And you bury your weakness before your enemies can smell it. But they never told us what a king does when he finds his queen bleeding in the dirt. They never warned us that the moment he finds her, the king dies, and something far more dangerous takes his place. It started with the rain. It was a torrential, biblical downpour that battered the coast of Highway 1, turning the Pacific Ocean into a churning cauldron of black water and white foam. The kind of storm that felt like a warning inside the lead vehicle of the convoy. The air was hermetically sealed, scented with expensive leather and the faint, smoky aroma of aged scotch. Damon Rhine, the alpha of the Iron Sovereign pack, sat in the back of the armored SUV. He was a creature of stillness. At 6'5", he filled the space, not just with his size, but with a suffocating, heavy gravity. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most humans made in a decade. But it was a costume, a thin layer of civilization draped over a predator. Damon was bored. He was always bored. When you are the apex predator of the West Coast, peace is just a polite word for waiting for the next war. He stared out the window, watching the rain slash against the reinforced glass, his reflection ghostly in the dark, and then he felt it. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a sight. It was a rip in the fabric of his reality, deep in the recesses of his mind. Titan woke up. His wolf, a beast of shadow and violence that usually slept through the monotony of pack politics, slammed against the walls of his psyche. Titan didn't just growl. He screamed. A primal, tearing sound that echoed in Damon's bones. The command didn't come from Damon's logic. It came from his blood. "Stop the car," Damon said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder that competed with the storm outside. "Alpha," his driver asked, eyeing the rearview mirror nervously. "We're exposed out here. The convoy isn't secure if we—" I said, "Stop the damn car," Damon roared. The brakes squealed, the heavy SUVs skidding on the wet asphalt before grinding to a halt on the desolate stretch of cliffside road. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thwack hiss of the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. Damon didn't wait for his security detail. He didn't wait for the umbrella or the all clear. He threw the door open and stepped out into the chaos. The wind hit him like a physical blow, instantly soaking his suit, plastering his dark hair to his forehead. The cold was biting, but Damon didn't feel it. He was running hot, his body temperature spiking as adrenaline flooded his system. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, filtering the air through senses that were far sharper than any human's. He smelled the ocean. He smelled the ozone of the lightning. He smelled the exhaust of the idling engines. And then, cutting through it all like a razor wire, he smelled her. It was faint, buried under the stench of mud and rain. But it was there, a scent that hit him in the solar plexus. Winter jasmine, fresh snow, and underneath that, the metallic, copper tang of sweet blood. Titan was pacing in his mind, clawing at the door, demanding to be let out. Find her. Protect her. Damon vaulted over the steel guardrail, his Italian leather shoes sinking into the slick mud of the embankment. He slid down the slope, ignoring the shouts of his beta. "Liam," from the road above. He moved with supernatural speed, a blur of motion in the darkness. He found her 50 yards down, caught in the tangle of brush near the overflowing drainage ditch. At first, she looked like a heap of discarded rags. She was barely visible against the mud, her skin so pale it seemed to glow with a sickly luminescence. She was crawling, dragging herself through the filth with agonizing slowness. Inch by painful inch, she was wearing a hospital gown that had been shredded to ribbons, stained crimson and brown. She was shivering so violently that her bones seemed to rattle against the wet earth. Damon froze. His heart, usually a steady, a slow drum of calculated cruelty. Skipped a beat, he approached her slowly. Like one might approach a wounded animal that knows it's dying. He dropped to his knees in the mud, ruining the suit. Ruining the image of the untouchable king. He didn't care. Easy. He murmured, his voice dropping an octave. Rumbling with a growl he couldn't suppress, the girl flinched. It was a violent, terrified jerk of her body that sent a fresh wave of scent pure, distilled terror into the air. She tried to scramble away, her fingers digging into the wet earth. But she had no strength left. She rolled onto her back, throwing a hand up to shield her face. Expecting a blow, Damon saw her face then, and the world tilted on its axis. She was skeletal, her cheeks hollowed by starvation, her eyes wide and wild. But even through the grime and the horror, she was devastating. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes that were a shocking, impossible shade of violet. He reached out. His hand trembled. He needed to touch her. It wasn't a want. It was a biological necessity. He needed to verify that she was real. That she wasn't a ghost conjured by the storm. His fingers brushed the cold, wet skin of her cheek. The connection was instantaneous. It wasn't a spark. It was a lightning strike. It traveled up his arm, fried his nervous system, and slammed into his heart. The tether snapped into place. An ancient, unbreakable iron chain linking his soul to hers. Titan threw back his head and roared in the center of Damon's mind. A single word that shattered everything Damon thought he knew about his life. The word hit him like a physical blow. For 30 years, Damon had believed he was alone. For 30 years, he had ruled with ice in his veins because he had nothing to lose. And now, in the middle of a storm, on the side of a highway, the universe had dropped his entire soul into the mud. Damon's pupils blew wide, his irises flooding with gold. The ruthlessness that defined him vanished, replaced instantly by an obsessive, suffocating panic. She was hurt. She was dying. His eyes raked over her body, cataloging the damage with a surgeon's precision and a lover's horror. Her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, definitely broken. Her ribs were mottled with bruises that looked days old. Her skin was burning with fever. Yet she was freezing to the touch. "Who did this?" Damon whispered, the words sounding like grinding gravel. She didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back in her head, her body going limp as the adrenaline finally failed her. "No. No. No." Damon growled. He scooped her up into his arms. She was dangerously light. Too light. It felt like holding a bird made of hollow bones and prayers. As he lifted her, the tattered collar of her gown shifted, revealing the side of her neck. Damon stopped breathing. The rain seemed to sizzle as it hit his shoulders, boiling off the heat, radiating from his body. There, branded into the delicate skin of her neck, was a burn mark. It wasn't a scar. It was fresh. The flesh was angry and weeping. It was a symbol. A jagged, crude circle with fangs dripping down. The Crimson Fang. Damon didn't just see red. He saw genocide. The Crimson Fang was a pack of sadists, led by Alpha Vargas, a man who traded in flesh and pain. They were enemies of the Iron Sovereign. But this was a declaration of war written in the flesh of Damon's soulmate. They had branded her, like cattle, like property. A low, vibrating sound started in Damon's chest. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting, the sound of a massacre beginning. Alpha, his beta, Liam, slid down the embankment, breathless. He took one look at the girl in Damon's arms. "I saw the blood. Saw the broken leg. Jesus." Liam hissed. "Is she a rogue? We need to call an ambulance. We can't bring a stray back to the..." Damon turned his head. His eyes were no longer human. They were glowing a luminous, predatory gold. His canines had elongated, pressing against his lower lip. Liam stopped talking instantly. He took a step back. The instinct to submit warring with his confusion, Damon pulled the girl tighter against his chest, shielding her from the wind, shielding her from the world. He looked at his beta, and for the first time, Liam saw the monster that lived inside the suit. No ambulance. Damon said. His voice was devoid of humanity. It was the voice of a god deciding who gets to live and who gets to burn. We go home. Damon commanded. Call Dr. Silas. Wake him up. Tell him to prep the surgery. He looked down at the unconscious girl, at the mud staining her pale skin, at the brand that marked her as a slave to his enemy. He felt the bond humming between them. A terrified, fragile thing. He looked back at Liam, his expression terrifyingly calm. And Liam, yes. Alpha, tell the security team to drive fast. Damon whispered, carrying his broken queen back toward the waiting convoy. Because if she dies, you all die. The Iron Sovereign estate did not look like a home. It looked like a weapon aimed at the sky, perched high on the jagged cliffs of the Pacific coastline. It was a fortress of glass and steel, a stark, architectural predator that loomed over the crashing waves below. Usually, the estate was a place of quiet, suffocating power, a sanctuary where the most dangerous wolves on the West Coast walked in silence. But tonight, the silence was dead. Tonight, the estate was a hive of chaotic, terrified energy. The main doors had been thrown open, not for a visiting diplomat, but for a bloody, muddy king carrying a broken girl. Deep in the eastern wing, in the sterile white expanse of the high-security medical bay, the air was heavy enough to crush a human lung. It smelled of antiseptic, latex, and the metallic tang of blood. But underneath that, drowning out the clinical sense, was something far more volatile: ozone, burnt pine, and a rage so potent it tasted like battery acid. Damon Rhine stood in the corner of Trauma Room 1, his back pressed against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. He hadn't changed. He was still wearing the ruined remains of his charcoal suit, the fabric stiff with dried mud and the blood of the woman lying on the table. The medical team moved around the bed in a blur of blue scrubs and hushed commands, their hands shaking. They weren't shaking because of the surgery. They were shaking because of him, Alpha, the head surgeon. Dr. Eris said, his voice trembling slightly as he snapped on a fresh pair of gloves. I need you to step out. Your pheromones. They are flooding the room. You're going to crash her vitals if you don't calm down. Damon didn't blink. His eyes were still that unnerving. Glowing gold, the wolf. Titan. Sitting right behind his pupils. Watching every incision. Every needle. I'm not leaving her, Damon said. His voice was a low, flat line of absolute refusal. If I leave, she dies. Fix her, or get out of my way. Dr. Aris swallowed hard, deciding that arguing with a feral alpha was more dangerous than the surgery itself. He turned back to the patient. Kaya looked small on the bed. Too small. Under the harsh halogen lights, the extent of her damage was a map of cruelty. Her skin was translucent, pale as moonlight, making the bruises blossoming across her ribs look like dark, violent flowers. As the nurses cut away the remnants of the muddy hospital gown, the room went deadly silent. My God, a nurse whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Damon stepped forward, the growl vibrating in his chest before he could stop it. What? What is it? It's not just the break. Alpha. Doctor, Eris said, his expression grim as he examined the angry, weeping brand on her neck. This tissue damage. It's necrotic. It's infected. The doctor picked up a scalpel, his jaw tight. This wasn't done with a standard iron. This is silver nitrate poisoning. Vargas didn't just brand her. He burned silver into her bloodstream to keep her from healing. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Silver was poison to their kind. It was agonizing. It prevented the natural, rapid regeneration of a wolf. To use it for a brand was torture in its purest, most sadistic form. Damon's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. He punched the steel wall next to him. The metal buckled with a screeching groan. Leaving a dent the size of a dinner plate, he burned her. Damon whispered to the room, to the air, to the universe that had allowed this to happen. He kept her broken for sport. We have to reset the ankle. Doctor, Eris said, ignoring the destruction of his clinic. It healed wrong. She's been walking on a shattered tibia for months. Maybe years. We have to re-break it to set it right. Damon turned away. Unable to watch, but unable to leave. The sound of the bone snapping was a wet, sickening crack that tore through his composure. It was that sound that woke her. Kaya didn't wake up slowly. She surfaced from the darkness like a drowning victim gasping for air. She bolted upright on the table. A scream tearing from her throat that died halfway up, strangled by the sheer exhaustion of her body. The heart monitor beside her went erratic, beep, 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 screaming, her panic to the room. Restrain her, doctor, Eris shouted. She's going to rip the IVs. No, Damon roared. He moved faster than the nurses. Crossing the room in a blur of shadow and motion, Kaya was scrambling back against the headboard. Her eyes wide, unseeing, lost in the nightmare of her memory. She flailed, her hands clawing at the air, expecting chains, expecting the whip. Please, she rasped, her voice like shards of glass. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. Don't put me in the kennel. Please. Not the kennel. The words were a knife in Damon's gut. The kennel. She thought she was still an animal in a cage. Kaya, Damon said. He didn't use his alpha voice, the command tone that forced submission. He used a tone no one in the pack had ever heard. It was soft, rumbling, terrified. Kaya, look at me. She froze. The scent hit her then. Not the rot of the dungeon, not the metallic smell of the cage, but something rich and deep. Pine, gunpowder, rain, her eyes. A striking, impossible violet, snapped to his. The fog of panic cleared for a fraction of a second. She saw him. She saw the man from the storm. The man with the eyes of burning gold. She didn't look relieved. She looked horrified. She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing the lapel of his ruined suit, pushing him away. You, she whispered, tears spilling over her lashes. You have to run. You have to let me go. Damon caught her hand. It was ice cold. He pressed it against his chest, right over the thunderous beat of his heart. I'm not letting you go. He swore. You are safe. You are in the Iron Sovereign. You are home. No. She sobbed, shaking her head. You don't understand. He's coming. Alpha Vargas. He never lets his toys go. He'll find me, and he'll kill you for touching me. Damon leaned in close. The space between them crackled with static electricity, the air pressure dropping as his power flared. He cupped her face in his large, rough hand, forcing her to look at him, to see the monster that was willing to burn the world for her. Let him come, Damon said softly. A dark promise that sent a shiver through the room. He has an army, she cried. He has monsters. I don't care if he has an army. I don't care if he has the devil himself on a leash. Damon growled, his thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. Let him try to take you. I will pave the road to hell with his entire pack before I let him touch a single hair on your head. The absolute certainty in his voice silenced her. For 4 years, she had known only pain and abandonment. But looking into Damon's eyes, seeing the raw, unadulterated violence he was holding back for her sake, She felt the first flicker of something dangerous. Hope. Just then, the double doors of the trauma room hissed open. Dr. Silas, the PACS geneticist and elder. I walked in. He wasn't looking at the patient. He was staring at a tablet in his hands. His face pale. His expression, one of utter disbelief. Alpha, Silas said, his voice barely a whisper. We have a problem. Damon didn't look away from Kaya. Unless the building is on fire. Get out. Silas, it's her blood work. Damon, Silas insisted, stepping further into the room. He bypassed the head surgeon and held the screen up. We ran a standard panel to check for cross-matching transfusions, but the machine threw an error code. I had to run it manually. Damon finally turned. His patient snapping. Spit it out. Her blood type. Silas said, looking at the girl on the bed with a mixture of awe and fear. It's not A or B. It's RH null. But look at the markers. Damon frowned, glancing at the screen. He didn't need a medical degree to see the anomaly. The genetic sequencing was glowing with a distinct, shimmering quality. It's golden blood. Silas whispered. Acor. The room went deadly silent. Even Kaya stopped crying. Watching the men with confusion. That's impossible. Damon said. That bloodline died out 20 years ago. The Solstice line was wiped out in the Northern Purge. The archives say they were wiped out. Silas corrected, his voice trembling. But DNA doesn't lie. Damon. This isn't just a stray you found on the highway. Silas looked at Kaya, then back at his alpha. This is Kaya Solstice. She is the daughter of the White Wolf. She is the lost princess of the Northern Territories. Damon looked back at Kaya. The pieces slammed together in his mind with the force of a freight train. The white blonde hair. The violet eyes. The reason Vargas hadn't killed her. Vargas wasn't just torturing a random girl. He was hoarding a nuclear weapon. She's a pureblood. Silas continued, reading from the report. If Vargas mates with her, if he takes her power, he becomes invincible. Damon looked at the woman in the bed. She wasn't just his mate. She was royalty. She was the queen of a dead kingdom. And she had crawled through hell to get to him. The protective instinct that had been roaring in Damon's blood shifted into something ancient. Something permanent. Burn the records. Damon commanded, his voice cold and hard. What Silas blinked. Delete the files. Wipe the server. Damon ordered, turning back to Kaya. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. No one knows who she is. Not until she is strong enough to stand. If the world finds out the White Wolf is alive, every assassin from here to the East Coast will come for her. He looked deep into Kaya's terrified eyes. You aren't a prisoner here. Kaya, Damon whispered. And you aren't a victim anymore. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. You are a queen. And tonight, we start a war to get your crown back. The silence in the medical bay was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb that had been armed but hadn't yet detonated. Damon stood by the bed, his hand still resting on the railing, staring at the woman who had just upended his entire understanding of the world. Kaya Solstice, the White Wolf, the last survivor of a royal massacre. His mind was a tactical computer, running simulations, calculating probabilities. It didn't make sense. The Crimson Fang pack was brutal. Yes, but they were not subtle. Alpha Vargas was a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. How had a man like that managed to infiltrate the most secure royal house in the Northern Territories, slaughter the entire bloodline, and smuggle the heir out without leaving a trace? And more importantly, how had he kept her hidden for 5 years? Information like that doesn't stay buried, unless someone was burying it for him. Damon looked at the door where Dr. Silas had just exited with the tablet that held the proof of Kaya's identity. Silas, his father's brother, The man who had taught Damon how to read the stars, how to track a deer, how to rule a kingdom. Kaya stirred on the bed. The painkillers were masking the agony of her broken bones, but they couldn't mask the terror in her eyes. She was watching Damon, her gaze darting to the door, then back to him. "You're thinking," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, a rasp of damaged vocal cords. "You're wondering how he did it." Damon turned his attention back to her. He didn't treat her like a victim. He treated her like an asset. "Vargas is a thug," Damon said flatly. "He couldn't have breached the Solstice perimeter alone. The security codes were ancient. Only family and High Council members had them." Kaya closed her eyes, a single tear leaking out. Her breathing hitched. "It wasn't just Vargas," she said. "The night they came. The night the lights went out. The alarm didn't sound. Someone disabled it from the inside." Damon went very still. "Who?" "I was under the table," Kaya continued, her voice trembling as the memory clawed its way to the surface. "My father was fighting. He was winning, until the second man walked in. My father knew him. He lowered his guard. He said a name." "What name?" Kaya Damon asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kaya opened her eyes. They were violet pools of betrayal. He called him Silas. The name hung in the air like smoke. Damon didn't react. He didn't scream. He didn't deny it. He simply ceased to be human. The warmth. The concern. The mate bond, he locked it all away behind a wall of titanium discipline. His face became a mask of terrifying neutrality. "Silas," Damon repeated. "My uncle. He was wearing a silver mask." Kaya whispered. "But I heard his voice. He told Vargas to take me. He said the king was weak, and a new order was rising." Damon stepped back from the bed. The air around him began to distort. The sheer pressure of his aura, cracking the plastic casing of the heart monitor. "Rest," Damon commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not let anyone in this room except the nurses." He turned and walked out the door. The transition was instant. The moment he crossed the threshold of the medical wing, Damon Rhine, the savior who had carried a girl through the rain, ceased to exist. In his place walked the Alpha of the Iron Sovereign, the god of war. He moved through the corridors of the estate with a predatory grace. Guards and servants scrambled out of his path, pressing themselves against the walls, instinctively lowering their heads. They could smell it on him, the scent of ozone, burning wire, and imminent death. He didn't run. He walked with the rhythmic, a heavy thud of a funeral drum. He reached the war room, a bunker buried deep beneath the estate. The heavy blast doors sensed his biometric signature and hissed open. Inside, the council was waiting. 12 men and women sat around a massive table of black granite, arguing over the border incursions. And there, at the head of the table, sitting in Damon's chair, was Silas. Silas looked up, a glass of amber scotch in his hand. He smiled. That familiar, paternal smile that Damon had trusted for 30 years. "Damon," Silas said, his voice smooth like oiled silk. "We heard reports of a stray in the medical wing. Is it true? Did you really bring a rogue into the—" Damon didn't stop walking. He circled the table, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The other council members fell silent, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Get up," Damon said softly. Silas chuckled. "It's nervous now." "Excuse me." Damon stopped directly behind the chair. He leaned down, placing his hands on the back of the leather seat. "I asked you a question. Uncle, how is Alpha Vargas these days? Does he still favor the branding iron?" Silas stiffened. It was microscopic, a tiny flinch of the shoulder muscles. But to a wolf, it was a confession screamed through a megaphone. I wouldn't know," Silas stammered. standing up and turning to face his nephew. I haven't spoken to that butcher in years. The word cracked through the room like a whip. Before Silas could blink, Damon's hand shot out. He grabbed Silas by the throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. The scotch glass shattered on the floor. "Alpha," the other council members shouted, jumping to their feet. "What are you doing?" "Stand down," Damon roared, his voice distorted by the wolf. "Anyone who moves is a traitor." He slammed Silas onto the granite table, scattering maps and tactical tablets. Silas clawed at Damon's hand, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging. "I found her." "Silas," Damon snarled, his face inches from his uncle's. "I found the girl. She told me about the mask. She told me about the night the solstice line died." The color drained from Silas's face. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the pathetic terror of a man who knows he is already dead. It was necessary. Silas choked out. "Trade routes. Vargas promised us the northern shipping lanes. If we just gave him the girl." Damon went still. The rage that filled him was so cold it burned. "You sold a child to a butcher for trade routes," Damon whispered. She was just a girl. She is my mate." The declaration hit the room like a shockwave. The council members gasped, exchanging horrified glances. Betrayal was one thing. Selling the Alpha's mate into slavery was a death sentence in every culture. In every pack. In every law. Damon didn't give him mercy. He didn't give him a trial. He grabbed Silas by the lapels of his jacket and threw him. Silas flew across the room, crashing through the glass partition that separated the war room from the communications center. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Silas landed in a heap of blood and expensive suit fabric. Groaning. Broken. But alive. "Lock him up." Damon ordered the guards, not even looking at the broken man. "Do not kill him. He is going to be my message to Vargas." Damon turned to the map on the wall. He traced a line from their location to the ruins of the Solstice estate in the north. He tapped his comms device. "Liam, get the jet ready. We're going to the Northern Territories." Sir Liam's voice crackled in his ear. "That's hostile territory. Vargas will be watching." "I know," Damon said. "That's the point." He marched out of the war room and back to the medical wing. He needed one last thing before he left. Kaya was awake when he returned. She looked stronger, the IV fluids bringing a faint flush of color back to her cheeks. She watched him enter, seeing the violence that still clung to him like a second skin. "Is it done?" she asked. "He's in the dungeon," Damon said. "He won't hurt you again." He walked to the side of the bed. "Kaya, listen to me." Silas talked. "But Vargas isn't going to stop. He knows you're here. He knows I know. He wants the ledger," Kaya said, pulling the sheet up to her chin. "My father kept a book, a genealogy ledger. It proves my bloodline. It proves that Vargas isn't the rightful heir to the north. It's buried in my childhood home, under the floorboards of the nursery. If Vargas gets that book, he destroys your legacy," Damon said. "I'm going to get it. He'll be waiting for you," she whispered. "It's a trap. I'm counting on it," Damon replied. A dark, predatory smile touched his lips. "I want him to look at me. I want him to focus on me. Because while he's watching the king, he won't see the knife coming for his throat." He leaned down. For the first time, he allowed himself to be gentle. He brushed his lips against her forehead. The contact was brief, burning, electric. It was a promise. It was an oath. "Stay alive." "Queen," Damon whispered against her skin. "I'm going hunting." He turned and walked into the darkness, leaving her with a taste of rain and vengeance in the air. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one he was about to bring down on the world. The ruins of the Solstice estate stood like a rotten tooth against the twilight sky of the Northern Territories. What had once been a palace of timber and light was now a blackened skeleton, overgrown with ivy and the ghosts of a massacre that had happened 5 years ago. Damon Ryan stepped out of the rented SUV, his boots crunching on the gravel of the long driveway. The air here was stale, smelling of old ash and sorrow. He moved through the tall grass of the backyard, past the rusted swing set, toward the nursery wing. He found the loose floorboard Kaya had whispered about in her delirium. He dug his fingers into the rot, ripping the wood away. There, wrapped in oilcloth, was the ledger. The book that proved Vargas was a usurper and Kaya was a queen. Got it, Damon muttered into his comms. Liam, prep the click. The sound of a floodlight engaging was the only warning he got. Blinding white beams cut through the darkness from the tree line, pinning Damon against the ruins. 6 armored trucks roared out of the woods, encircling him. These weren't pack wolves. They smelled of synthetic adrenaline and cold steel. Mercenaries. Damon Ryan. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Drop the book. Damon didn't drop the book. He smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of humor. You brought 6 trucks, Damon shouted back, his voice calm, carrying effortlessly over the distance. You should have brought a tank. The mercenaries opened fire. Damon didn't take cover. He let the beast out. He didn't shift gracefully. It was a violent, tectonic explosion of anatomy. His bones cracked and reshaped in the space of a heartbeat. His clothes shredded as midnight black fur erupted from his skin. In seconds, the man was gone. In his place stood Titan. He was a monster of shadow and muscle, standing nearly 5 feet at the shoulder the size of a grizzly bear, but with the speed of a viper. His eyes weren't the gold of a normal alpha. They were burning. Hellfire red. Titan roared, a sound that shattered the remaining glass in the windows of the ruined house. He didn't run away from the bullets. He charged into them. He hit the first truck like a battering ram, crumpling the reinforced grille and flipping the vehicle onto its side. He tore the door off with his teeth, dragging the driver out and tossing him 20 feet into the darkness. It wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. Titan moved through the mercenaries like a scythe through wheat. He was a blur of black fur and flashing fangs. He snapped rifles in half with his jaws. He crushed tactical armor with a swipe of his massive paws. It was visceral, wet, and cinematic in its brutality. Within 3 minutes, the backyard was silent, save for the crackle of burning engines and the groans of the dying. Titan shifted back. Damon stood naked in the wreckage, steam rising from his blood-soaked skin. He walked over to the commander of the mercenary unit, a man pinned under the wheel of his own truck. Damon crouched down, his human eyes wide and manic. Who sent you? The commander coughed blood, a jagged grin spreading across his face. Doesn't matter, he wheezed. He's not here. Ryan. Damon froze. The blood in his veins turned to ice. He knew you'd come for the book. The man laughed, the sound bubbling in his chest. He said you have a hero complex. We were just the distraction. Where is Vargas? Damon demanded, his hand closing around the man's throat. He's at the glass house, the mercenary whispered. He's with the girl. Damon snapped the man's neck, silencing him forever. He scrambled for his comms, ignoring his bloody fingers. Liam status. Static. Then, screaming. Alpha. They breached the perimeter. Helicopters. They have gas. We can't hold them. The line went dead. Damon looked up at the moon, hidden behind storm clouds. He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He went deadly, terrifyingly quiet. Get the jet, he whispered to the wind. We are going back, and we are going to burn the world. 500 miles south, the Iron Sovereign estate was an inferno. The glass walls that overlooked the ocean were shattered. Smoke billowed from the medical wing. Vargas hadn't come for territory. He hadn't come for money. He had come for property. In the chaos of the medical bay, Kaya was fighting. She dragged herself across the floor, her cast heavy, her body weak. But Vargas was faster. The alpha of the Crimson Fang was a hulking brute, his face a roadmap of scars, his smell a mixture of rot and expensive cologne. He kicked the door open, striding through the smoke. "Found you," he sneered. He grabbed Kaya by her hair, hauling her up. She screamed, clawing at his arms. But she was weakened by the drugs, by the trauma. "You thought you could run?" Vargas laughed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick, heavy collar made of dull metal, silver. "No," Kaya shrieked. Thrashing, he slammed the collar around her neck. The locking mechanism engaged with a heavy clack. The effect was instant. It was like being severed from her soul, the connection to her inner wolf, to the little bit of strength she had regained, was cut. The silver burned against her skin. A cold, chemical fire that made her knees buckle. "Now," Vargas whispered, stroking her cheek with mock tenderness. "Let's go welcome your hero home." The Gulfstream jet didn't land. It descended like a falling meteor toward the private airstrip, before the wheels even touched the tarmac. The cargo hatch hissed open. Damon Rhine didn't wait for the stairs. He leaped from the moving plane, hitting the pavement with a jarring impact that would have shattered a human's legs. He rolled, came up sprinting, and didn't stop. He tore through the courtyard, bypassing the skirmishes between his guards and Vargas's men. He was hunting. He slammed through the double doors of the Great Hall. The scene that greeted him froze the blood in his veins. The Great Hall, his throne room, was filled with enemies. 50 Crimson Fang soldiers stood in a circle, weapons drawn, and at the far end, sitting on Damon's black basalt throne, was Vargas, and at his feet, chained like a feral dog, was Kaya. She was on her knees. The silver collar was humming, smoke curling up from where the metal touched her pale skin. She looked broken. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "You're late, Damon," Vargas boomed, his voice echoing off the high stone walls. Damon walked forward. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He walked until the circle of guns was tight around him. "Let her go," Damon said. His voice wasn't loud, but it vibrated in the teeth of every man in the room. "Let her go," Vargas laughed. Standing up, he yanked the chain attached to Kaya's collar. Pulling her head back, she whimpered, a sound that tore at Damon's soul. "Look at her," Damon Vargas shouted. "She is weak. She is a broken thing. She is a breeder. She belongs in a cage, producing heirs for the strongest alpha." Damon stopped 10 feet away. He looked at the guns pointed at his chest. He looked at Vargas. And then he looked at Kaya. "She is not a breeder," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is your queen." "You filth," Vargas snarled, pressing a silver combat knife against Kaya's carotid artery. "Take one more step, and I bleed her right here." Damon froze. He calculated the distance. Too far. If he shifted, Vargas would slice her throat before Damon could reach him. He slowly raised his hands. The king of the Iron Sovereign, the man who never knelt, began to lower himself to the ground. "Take me," Damon whispered. "Let her go." "And take me." Kaya watched him, through the haze of pain and the suppressing fog of the silver collar. She saw him. She saw the man who had found her in the rain, the man who had carried her, the man who was now kneeling in the glass of his own home, surrendering his life to save hers. Something inside her chest cracked. It wasn't a bone. It was the cage she had built around her own soul, the fear that had paralyzed her for 5 years. It evaporated, replaced by a love so fierce, so protective. It burned hotter than the silver. The voice didn't come from her throat. It came from her blood, deep inside her, buried under layers of trauma and poison. The solstice wolf woke up. It didn't wake up with a growl. It woke up with a roar that transcended the physical realm. Kaya's head snapped up. Her eyes were no longer violet. They were white, pure, blinding, celestial white. The air in the room instantly grew heavy, charged with static. The temperature spiked. Sizzle. The silver collar around her neck didn't unlock. It began to glow cherry red, then orange, then white. What? Vargas gasped, dropping the chain as the metal became too hot to hold. Kaya screamed. But it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of power. The collar melted. Liquefied silver dripped down her hospital gown, sizzling on the floor, but leaving her skin untouched. Her body heat had spiked to supernova levels. Burning through the suppressor, she stood up. She didn't look like a broken girl anymore. A spectral projection manifested behind her, a massive, translucent white wolf, towering 10 feet high. Its teeth bared in a silent snarl. Kaya looked at the 50 soldiers surrounding them. She opened her mouth. And when she spoke, it wasn't her voice. It was the Alpha voice. The voice of command that had been lost for generations. Kneel. It wasn't a choice. It was biology. It was an order written into the DNA of every wolf in existence. The shockwave of energy knocked the windows out of their frames, one by one. The Crimson Fang soldiers dropped. Their weapons clattered to the floor. Their knees hit the stone. They bowed their heads, exposing their necks in absolute submission. Vargas fell back against the throne, clutching his head, blood running from his nose as he tried to resist the command. Only one person in the room remained standing, Damon. He stood amidst the sea of kneeling enemies, looking at her. The command washed over him, but it didn't force him down. Because he wasn't her subject. He was her equal. Kaya stepped over the kneeling soldiers, walking toward Vargas. Her feet were bare. Her gown was torn. But she looked like a goddess of vengeance carved from ice and starlight. She pointed a trembling finger at the man who had tortured her. "My pack," she whispered, the white fading from her eyes as the spectral wolf snarled. She looked at Damon. "Kill him." Vargas knew it was over. He could smell it, not just the scent of his own fear, which was acrid and sour, but the scent of his authority evaporating into the air. His army was on their knees. His breeder was standing over him like a deity of judgment. But a tyrant does not die quietly, with a scream of pure, impotent rage. Vargas threw himself backward, his body contorting as he forced a shift. Bones snapped. Brown fur erupted. He lunged, not at Kaya, but at her throat. A desperate, the suicidal attempt to take the queen down with him. He never made it. Damon didn't roar. He didn't posture. He simply ceased to be where he was standing and reappeared in the air between the girl and the monster. Titan met Vargas in midair. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. There was no long speech about justice. There was no villainous monologue. There was just the wet, sickening crunch of jaws clamping down on a windpipe. Damon's black wolf slammed Vargas into the stone floor, the impact cracking the foundation. He didn't let go. He shook his massive head once. Violently, a brutal, efficient snap. Vargas went rigid. Then, he went limp. The tyrant of the Crimson Fang, the butcher of the North, was dead before his body even hit the ground. Silence returned to the great hall. Absolute, ringing silence. Kaya stood over the body. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. For 4 years, she had dreamed of this moment in the darkness of her cell. She watched the light fade from Vargas's eyes with a grim, cold satisfaction. She didn't feel fear. She felt weightless. The Crimson Fang soldiers, those 50 men who had been ready to kill her minutes ago, looked at the broken body of their alpha. Then, they looked up at the girl with the white blonde hair and the spectral wolf fading at her back. They didn't reach for their weapons. They lowered their foreheads to the cold stone floor. They weren't bowing to a conqueror. They were bowing to the blood. Damon released the corpse. He backed away, his muzzle stained crimson. He looked at Kaya, chest heaving, waiting for her reaction. waiting to see if she was afraid of the monster he had become for her. She wasn't. Damon shifted back. He stood there, human again, naked, covered in dust and the blood of his enemy. He didn't care about the soldiers. He didn't care about the dignity of the crown. He walked toward her. His steps heavy and unsure, he stopped in front of her. And then, the Wolf King, the man who had burned half the state to find her, dropped to one knee. He lowered his head, exposing his neck to her, the ultimate sign of submission. "My pack is yours, Kaya," he rasped, his voice raw. "My life is yours. Command me." Kaya looked down at him. She saw the scars on his shoulders. She saw the devotion in his eyes that was deeper than any ocean. She reached out, her hand trembling, and cupped his blood-streaked face. "Stand up, Damon," she whispered. He looked up, confused. "I don't want a subject," she said, her voice gaining strength, echoing through the hall. She grabbed his hand, interlacing her fingers with his, pulling him to his feet until they stood eye to eye. "I want a partner." She squeezed his hand. "We rule together." Epilogue. The fires of that night eventually burned out. But the fire they started in the kingdom never did. The merger of the Iron Sovereign and the remnants of the Crimson Fang wasn't easy. But no one dared challenge the union of the Black Wolf and the White Queen. Weeks later, as the morning sun cast long, golden rays over the repaired balcony of the master suite, Damon stood by the railing. Watching the forest, Kaya stepped out behind him. She moved with a grace that hadn't been there before, no longer limping, no longer hiding. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. They looked out over their territory, a world that had tried to crush them both, and failed. Damon pressed a kiss to the top of her head, smiling as he watched the sun rise over a new dynasty. The world thought she was broken. Damon's voice echoed in the wind, soft and final. "I just needed to help her find her teeth." And that is the explosive conclusion to the Wolf King's ruin. From a girl left for dead in the rain, to the queen of the most powerful alliance in history, Kaya and Damon prove that true power isn't about control, it's about who you're willing to bleed for. I really hope you enjoyed this darker, grittier romance. If that scene in the throne room gave you chills, do me a favor and smash that like button. It really helps the channel. What do you think about Kaya's choice at the end? Should she have been the one to deliver the final blow to Vargas? Or was it more poetic that Damon did it for her? I want to hear your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Moonfire Tales and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Stay wild, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.